Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our roundtable for how design teams successfully collaborate and hire remotely. We are waiting for one more person to pop in, but while we're doing that, I would like to kick off some introductions. So my name is Ted Goas. I am a product designer at Dialpad. I work remotely from my home in New Jersey. And before I was at Dialpad, I was at Stack Overflow, working in what I think is a first-class remote culture for about 4 years. So, Courtney, why don't you go next?
Awesome. Yeah, I'm Courtney Cotton. I work for Microsoft. I actually am focused on the documentation and learning platform, and I am a design team lead there. I've been working for Microsoft for about the last year, and I also worked at Stack Overflow before with Ted. And I am living and working out of Indiana.
I can go next. Hey guys, I'm Yitong. I am a staff product designer at Coinbase. I've been here for a little over 2 years now. I've worked on a lot of things. On most of my experience here has been on the main consumer product, but recently I've been on the design system team. And I have been working, like I'm sure many of you, remote since COVID. So it's been interesting.
And I'm Shannon. I'm an email developer for UnitedHealthcare, mostly doing B2C communications. Outside of email, I'm absorbing just about any software engineering course you could find. I really enjoy CSS and JavaScript. I'm working remotely from my home in Maryland, and I've been remote for about a year now.
And I am Jason Rodriguez, moderating everything today. But like Ted and Shannon, I come from the email world, which is an interesting world to come from. But I'm the community and product evangelist for a company called Litmus that makes tools for email developers, email marketers to build better email campaigns, track them, test them, all that good stuff. Cool. I work remotely I'm right outside of Detroit, and I've been remote for about 7 years now, which has been awesome. And I don't think I could change it for anything in the world right now. So let's. You each talked a little bit about your current roles, but I'd love to hear each a little bit about just your experiences as a designer, how you got started as a designer, and kind of work your way up to where you are right now. So I'm looking at my screen here. I see Yitong, if you don't mind going first.
Sure. All right. I have the most embarrassing story, so I'll set the bar real low, and then everybody else can go after me. So I grew up really liking anime and watched a lot of anime and got sucked into the world of DeviantArt as a kid. I don't know if any of y'all remember that. Great. Okay. Yeah. Some of us are former DeviantArt fans. So I got my start on that with a pirated version of Photoshop. Adobe don't arrest me. And just making fan art for animes. And eventually just decided that like Photoshop wasn't a real career. And went to business school for undergrad, which like was very smart in retrospect, being very sarcastic right now. And but through it all, kind of like got roped into starting a company with a friend of mine. So for about 2 years, we did a startup and then eventually folded. And at that point, I was like, all right, well, I can do everything a little bit and nothing really well. And I should probably pick something. And I think of all the skills that I had, design was the one that really like spoke the most to me. So in that sense, I've always been a little bit of a generalist, and I still carry that with me in my work. So after that, worked at a studio for a little bit, and then now work at Coinbase, and have always found myself a little bit like wearing different hats. Sometimes a PM, sometimes a really shitty engineer, and then like most of the time a designer. So work also a lot of side projects. I built a plugin for Figma recently called Autoflow. And before that, built a reference website for marketing pages called Good Web Design.
Nice. Courtney, how about you?
Yeah, so my career actually started when I was in high school. My father had ran a newspaper, so I actually had to build a website. So this was back when like literally we're using tables and putting together images and just like throwing up advertisements that way. They weren't really like any.
Some of us are still using tables. We can't hang down on it too much.
Obviously, if that was my weapon of choice, like I would not have picked that. But at the time, that was like cutting edge, right? It was amazing to have a website, and this was like 2007, 2008, and so I saw that there was like an opportunity there to do things on the web on a computer. And I went to college I just got basically a traditional graphic design degree. At that time, there weren't really programs focused on like interaction design or anything of that nature. I really ended up falling into some good luck. I ended up in a software engineering firm that didn't have any design chops at all. So I ended up coming into the company to do graphics, and I ended up actually working on software. So that's kind of how I got my start in software and building web products. And it kind of evolved from there. I ended up at Stack Overflow building things, and the rest, yeah, it's kind of history.
How about you, Shannon?
Similar story. I went with the traditional graphic design background because I thought it was a good base for whatever I decided to do later in life. And then when I graduated, I got a lot of, so you do websites? And I'm like, sure, I guess. So I learned to code on my own. I think I had one web design class in college, and it was building with tables, which is really weird for the 2000s. There I learned to code on my own, which led to roles as email designer, email developer, and now do more of the development with design, but I do work with designers and, Photoshop files and sketch files a lot.
And Ted.
Yeah, I feel like a little weird describing my origin story. I hear a lot of stories about how folks just fell into it by doing a website for their friend's band or hacking away on their MySpace page back in the day. But I actually went to school for this stuff, but it was really early. This was like 2000, 2001. So a lot of times the professor in the class would just be like learning this stuff together. I did take a year of computer science when I first started. Wasn't really that good at it, so I transitioned to the graphics world. But the engineering, I guess, stuck with me since I'm also a little bit of a front-end developer and also an email developer. And yeah, after that I graduated, hopped from one job to the next. But I actually did fall into the remote aspect of it. A couple of years ago, I just had a couple bad weeks at my job. Fairly common story, I'd think. And I knew Courtney actually from Dribbble, and when I saw a opportunity at Stack Overflow opened up, I asked him about it. He encouraged me to reply. I went through the process, and at the time I was just looking for another job, and Stack Overflow just happened to be remote. It was the first remote job I ever had. And after that, the rest is history. I've been remote for the past four and a half years, something like that.
Awesome. I'd love to hear a little bit about what your team makeup looks like. I feel like we have a good mix of kind of smaller teams, and then we think of, Microsoft as a pretty large team. So maybe we could go into what those teams look like, how many people there are, what those different roles look like, before we start talking about how everybody hires for those teams. Guess we'll go in that. Let's keep that order. So, Yitong, if you want to get started.
Sure. Yeah. So the design team at Coinbase is now 34 people, including research and brand and writing. Product design on that team is around, let's say, 20 something. I work on a team that has 11 engineers-ish, 10, 11 engineers for my immediate team. It's a big rewrite project, so there's a lot of people on this team. And I recently transitioned to remote with this team, but a couple of the engineers there have always been either remote or out of New York, which is not our main office.
Courtney, what's the your team at Microsoft look like these days?
You'd be surprised that you would think that Microsoft would be super mature in this space, and they're absolutely not. Like, this is very new for them too. So my team, specifically the content and learning team within like cloud and AI, they've been moving towards remote. So they're kind of like the first team within Microsoft kind of adopting this remote first focus. And it's actually hybrid right now. So my team makeup is, we have many people in Redmond for the design team. There's 3 researchers, 3 information architects, like 4 or 5 designers. They all are in the Redmond office. And then we have, really our PM team is actually more distributed than our design team. So I was the first kind of design hire to focus on recruiting and like retention of remote employees and kind of best practices, coming from a place like Stack Overflow that I really consider it like a leader in that aspect of setting good groundwork, having good principles, having a good support network. So yeah, like they're definitely learning. It's young there. It's kind of fledgling. So I think that there's certainly more resources now than there were, 7 years ago. Jason, I'm sure you know, like there weren't a lot of people working remote 10 years ago. And now there's a lot of resources out there to make it easier and do it properly, right? Scaling up is a lot easier. So that's kind of what our team looks like right now.
Yeah, I feel like we kind of took our cues from like Basecamp. Yeah, all of our stuff kind of comes from the Basecamp world. That's where we kind of learn how to do things. But there's so many more resources now, which is absolutely amazing. Shannon, how about you? What's your team makeup look like?
Sure. So my team right now is about 5 or 6 of us, all email developers, and then 1, I guess, technical architect. So more of the technical side of working with email. As far as the design team, it's separate from what I do specifically. I'm not sure if they're remote or not, but my team is pretty much all remote, and that was prior to COVID as well.
And Ted?
Yeah, I also work on a pretty small team here. I think the product design team is it's less than 10 people. I think it's 8, something like that. We don't have dedicated UX researchers yet. I'm fighting for that, but right now we have to tag team that one with our product managers. And we have a marketing design as a separate discipline, like marketing and growth design. But again, that team is pretty small. It's only 1 to 2 people. But the fact that we're growing, the company's actually doing pretty well in these times. So one of the things that I'm excited to do is kind of grow and define some of these processes and build the team here, which is one of the big things that attracted me to the job. So.
Nice. I was watching the session right before ours, which was all about kind of like the interview process and the hiring process, especially remote. And I'd love to hear how each of your teams goes about hiring, especially remotely. But maybe first talk a little bit about your experience for your interview process for your current role, especially if that was something you had to go through remotely. And maybe after that, kind of contrast it to what your current hiring process looks like.
Sorry, just to repeat the questions to understand it. You're saying like walk through how we got
how
into
do you
our
find
current
that
role
role and go, what did that interview process look like? Obviously, you're on the kind of successful end of that process. And I think that's what a lot of people would love to hear. What are the ways you got to that successful outcome?
Yeah, sure thing. I guess since we're doing the same order, I'll just go ahead again. I was working on so those of you who don't know crypto, there is Coinbase is a crypto company. You can think of it as like a bank for Bitcoin. But like Bitcoin is not the only thing happening in crypto. And like in early 2017, there was this app called CryptoKitties. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it was like Neopets meets Bitcoin kind of deal. And that thing just like took out like wildfire. And for a while, like you had to like buy these like crypto Neopets for like hundreds of dollars. And I was like, that's crazy. I should make a tracker for like how expensive these kitties are. So I started working on like a tracker. Like somebody had like already done most of the data, and I just had to like skin it. And I was kind of just got connected with like a bunch of designers in crypto. And one of them was the woman who led design at Coinbase at the time. Her name is Courtney, and she was like, you should just come hang at Coinbase for a little bit and just like try contracting to see how you like that. And at the time, Coinbase was still small enough. We were at about a little less than 300 people. So there was a strong carryover culture of work trials from the early days of the company. And so like it was pretty common practice for people to just come in for like a week or two, work with the team. And like if that worked out and people liked working with each other, there would just be no interview and you just like get the offer. So it's a little bit different. And so that's exactly what I did. I worked 2 weeks there as a contractor. And at the end of it, like we all liked working with each other. So that's how I got the offer at Coinbase. We are now 1,100 person company, and I don't think that works anymore at scale. So we've transitioned to a fairly standard process. There's the recruiter screen, hiring manager screen, then you do the onsite. Onsite is a portfolio presentation for about an hour, and then you have like one-on-one/one-on-two chats with the stakeholders. So that's usually a PM, an engineer, a designer or two, and then the hiring manager, and finally the recruiter. While we were still in office, we used to do these great candidate lunches where the entire design team would show up and eat lunch with the candidate to really get a sense of like who they are, but also for them to get a sense of like who we are as a team. We haven't quite figured out how to replace that. And honestly, that was one of the most successful parts of our loop. Like, you know, people were like reasonably charming on the team at Coinbase, and that always helps close the deal. But now we don't get to do that anymore. And we're trying to figure out how to amend that.
What tools do you use right now then to conduct those kind of interviews?
Yeah, we're pretty old school. We're still on Hangouts.
Okay.
Hangouts calendar. We tried a couple of different things, but Hangouts and calendar is just bread and butter for us, which means we don't get to do a whiteboard anymore, which might or may not be good news for people.
Nice. Courtney, how about your kind of path to Microsoft and the current hiring process?
So I like to contrast it with what we did at Stack Overflow because I think it's very unique to see the two sides. Like at Microsoft, they have basically adopted the standard hiring process, right, across all teams. So it's not necessarily oriented towards like remote hires, which is interesting because it requires basically the individual, you know, if you make it through the recruiter screen and the hiring manager screen, you come on site to Redmond and you make your pitch. So you will literally come in with the portfolio and they'll say, hey, show us what you have, like what stories do you want to tell us and talk to us about, which I really actually liked that. There was not like at Stack Overflow, we had a design test series and it was like pretty intensive. I mean, you were going to spend quite a bit of time on it. You would get paid and that was awesome. And you get real access to the team. But it was much less about like pitching your own story and being like a storyteller and like having a presence, and more about can you be really methodical with your work and show your work, and then how do you integrate live with the team? Because we really focused on like providing a channel for them to talk to the actual people they would work with on the project, right? So you would have access to the PMs and other people like data people on the team to pull numbers for you if you wanted it. Sometimes we would actually end up using those solutions. So we paid the people for their time and we would be able to kind of see the contrast in thinking. So it was kind of cool at Stack Overflow because they had the test process, but on the other side, it might not be the same strength for everybody. I know me personally, I like to be able to sculpt my story and go in and tell it the way I want. And so at Microsoft, that's kind of how it is. You go in there, tell your story, and then you interview. The rest of your day is kind of blocked out to do one-on-one interviews where they kind of walk you through a series of questions, right? Standard question set, and see how you perform. So I would say like just really focusing on like perfecting your story, right? Like how can you prove that you can impact a team in some way?
What's that storytelling session actually look like? Like, what are the logistics of that? Do you have, you know, your portfolio up? Do you have like a full like pitch deck around yourself?
You can get creative as you want. I mean, and that's another thing that I kind of liked about it. You know, I was actually able to build a Figma like presentation, right? Like I built a presentation with kind of pseudo wireframes and prototypes in it, so I could click through it and talk to it as I'm presenting. Like the slides are animating, and it's not just a slide; it's actually like the UI, right? So it felt more like a keynote. And so you have a screen that you can use, and it's a boardroom with people sitting around a board table. But once again, I think there's certainly like things that favors favor certain types of people, especially if you really get your story on point. So
yeah,
and it's definitely changed. We've hired 2 people on our team here recently, and obviously they can't travel to Redmond, so everything has to be scheduled and blocked out. And so you don't get those like little conversations happening between, like, when you are walking somebody to a room, right? They're walking you to a room and you kind of get a feel for their personality. So I would say a little bit of that has been removed from the process.
You'll have to weigh in on the Figma versus Adobe XD debate that's currently raging in the stage chat. Shannon, how about you? What did that path look like, and how does it compare to your current hiring practices?
Sure. You mean getting hired in my current role?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty straightforward. So I was actually found through a third-party recruiter. They emailed me, and I think when you're in that, like, opting in LinkedIn, like, oh, recruiters can contact me, sometimes get a lot of spam, but it was actually a really clear, direct message. Hey, I have this role at this company. Would you be interested in learning more about it? And I asked, well, where is it located? And they're like, well, it's remote. I'm like, okay, cool. And I think for the most of it was just phone calls, like initial call with the recruiter. I chatted with someone on my team who's still with the company, but I was sort of backfilling their previous role. And then a couple chats over a few months with the hiring manager. And it was pretty seamless from my perspective. And I don't remember doing a design test or a code test or anything, which looking back is maybe a little surprising, but I guess it worked out in my case.
Nice. Ted, do you want to describe your experiences?
Yeah, so I just started at Dialpad about a month ago, so this is all still very fresh in my mind. But I was hired as a full-time remote person from the start, so I just expected the entire interview process to be done online, and it was. Dialpad does have some offices in I think it's the Bay Area and then Vancouver. Those are the 2 big ones. So obviously, especially now, traveling to do an on-site is not really possible. So everything was done over video. Everything moved pretty quickly. As far as the interview stages, it was pretty comparable to just a regular on-site interview process. And yeah, just since I've been through this now twice, since I've interviewed for 2 remote jobs, I would just say that there's not really that much difference between an on-site and a remote interview, other than just like the logistics of the interview itself. It's the same. You go through a screener, maybe you talk to the HR recruiting, you talk to design teams, maybe you talk to a couple other teams you'll be working with. All the steps were pretty much the same from my past office jobs. So if I can offer one bit of advice, it's that if you're going for a remote job, don't get caught up on the fact that it's remote. Just approach it as you would any other interview.
Nice. So Courtney, you talked a little bit about that storytelling kind of session. And it looks like all of you have kind of gone through a couple of different, I guess, ways of showing off your skills. I'd love to hear from each of you and see if there's what you think the best way for designers to show off those skills. Is it focusing on their portfolio, like going all in on their portfolio? Is it showing off working code or like linking out to GitHub repos? What are those tools that people that are looking for jobs right now, what should they have in their tool belt to try to make that job search a little bit easier? I guess same order if we want to.
Yeah. I think you'll probably find a lot of this on the internet already. I think the one thing that I have that I feel like maybe a little different is to reach out directly to designers and hiring managers. I think that is probably the thing that I tell people the most. And that's also been like personally what's been successful for me. Most people who work at companies are incentivized to refer you and to bring you into a company if you are good. Like they get paid to do that. And it's not like they're even doing you a favor. They're just doing themselves a favor at the end of the day. So like they're like pretty open to doing this. It's like you can think of every time you reach out to somebody cold, that they're like, you're just kind of like throwing like, you know, a couple $1,000 their way potentially, because like if they refer you and it's successful, they'll like earn a referral bonus. And the way that I would encourage people to try it is to just like reach out for a casual chat and just be like, hey, yo, like I like heard a lot about like X, your, you know, company, and like you guys seem like you do really cool work. Just wanted to like get coffee, no like specific goal, and just to like chat. And you connect with that person, you like establish a good rapport, establish that you're like a reasonably good a designer. And then at the end, it's like, hey, I'm interested in like this job, you know, like you want to like refer me. And sometimes that's a no, but sometimes that's a yes. And if you get a yes, you tend to be able to short circuit a lot of the like early screening, which is where I find a lot of people get lost. Like there's always these horror stories of people going through and like applying to like dozens of places like that. You get to short circuit by just directly reaching out to email people that you don't even know there. And honestly, the reply rate from people that you cold reach out to is usually a little better than the recruiters. And you're also probably able to reach out to a couple of people per company. Like, please don't spam everyone, because that's not nice and you'll get caught and people will be like, this is weird. But like, if you reach out to like 2-3 people and like you have something to talk about with them, I think that's like pretty reasonable.
I think that's fantastic advice. And I feel like a lot of people have probably run in that situation where they'll be talking to a recruiter and they don't really know the domain that well, or they don't know what skills they're actually supposed to be looking for because they don't come from a design or engineering or development background. So short circuiting that and going directly to those team members is brilliant. What are the best like platforms for doing that, do you think? Obviously, I feel like nobody likes getting spammed on LinkedIn, getting all those random ass messages, but platforms that you think are better for doing that kind of tactic?
I'm gonna sound really like, this is gonna sound kind of obvious, but like you should email people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Email people. Yeah, most people have their email. If you're a designer and they have like somewhat of an online presence, they'll have their email readily broadcasted on the interwebs, and like it's pretty easy to dig it up and just email them. You know, write like a nice subject line and be friendly and be direct, and usually it'll work.
Nice. Courtney, how about you? Any tips for the best way for people to kind of show off their skills or what they should have at the ready before they start applying an interview?
I love to see like when somebody has a vision for themselves, like they know what their superpower is, you know, and they really kind of enhance that, because all of us are unique. We all have like we might have like overlapping skills, but when we're looking to add somebody to the team, sometimes we're trying to find people that have like different powers, right? You're uniting your hero team and you're trying to get people in the room that are going to empower you or build upon your skills. And so like when I see somebody that has a portfolio that's like, you know, I'm really visually focused, but I actually like to tinker around with like code projects. And so if they link off to the GitHub profile, I think that's amazing. I mean, even if they're just focused on user experience most of the time in their day job, showing that range, that full gamut of things that they can do, or different ways their brain works is really valuable. So just, I think that that's my biggest piece of advice is like, figure out the vision you want to talk about for yourself. You know, who are you trying to portray when you come into this interview, and what makes you unique and stand out? Everybody's unique, so try to embrace that.
Cool. Shannon or Ted, any thoughts?
Oh, and then obviously, if you can take that like a portfolio piece and tie it back to like how you improved a core business value metric or something, that's a really strong and compelling story to tell. If you're saying, you know, we leaned on this research, it's like, great, I know you can do research and I know you can go through all the motions of doing design, but at the end of the day, we all work for companies and we have to deliver on a core customer value, whether that's a success metric of happiness or it could be a bottom dollar line. You know, you increase sales by this much. That's an awesome, compelling story to tell. So try to, when you're embedded in a project, try to make sure you're close to the people that do data and run those numbers, because, you know, your PM's really closely attached to the project success. You should be too, and saving those away for your portfolio for later, because they make great pitches.
Nice. Shannon or Ted, any kind of last thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And it's something that I'm trying to be better about too, is having this data to say like, yes, this did this did well based on previous years or whatever the case may be, because people do want to see that what you're doing can drive a business impact or make improvements, even if it's just like we tested something and it didn't work, but we tried it, and you can speak to that. That's really important.
And Courtney's making me feel a little guilty. I don't know if I have a vision for myself now. But yeah, plus one to what everybody else has said. I'm a big fan of just like I feel like when we're hiring and we're looking at people's websites and portfolios, I feel like things like case studies are kind of table stakes at this point. But I'm a fan of just really good story. Like if you're a good storyteller, if you can present. And if you can either do that online, like on your website, or in an interview, like set the stage, like make me feel the problem that existed before, and show me how you helped solve this. Because a lot of us can do good design work, but if we can't sell that, then it just sits on somebody's computer as a picture that's not being used.
Nice, yeah. I saw in the chat Dylan asked what everybody's superpowers are. Shannon and Courtney, so you kind of weigh in there. But Yitong and Ted, if you don't mind sharing your superpowers in the chat, that'd be awesome.
Not running away from HTML email design.
Nice,
screening.
Yeah. That's a good superpower to have. It's yeah, underappreciated.
Ted's power is HTML email.
Yeah.
He wears the cape.
Nice. So let's get into kind of the mechanics of working on a design team these days, especially as more of us are working remotely. So I'd love to kind of go into, kind of day-to-day stuff for your role in your team, and even talk a little bit about what tools you use to both communicate with your teammates, kind of document projects and decision making and all that good stuff, and actually collaborate on design work. So maybe we'll go backwards this time. Ted, if you want to kick things off.
So we're just listing some tools and some processes that we use?
Yeah.
Okay, well, as far as design tooling goes, our team is all in on Figma. I would just love the document model and how it, Figma is a great tool for designers to use. Sketch is a great tool. Adobe XD is a great tool. Photoshop is a good tool. But the thing that separates Figma for us is that what it does for the non-designers, how you can just invite somebody in, how you can send them a link. Like Courtney said, you can make a presentation. It's that extension that kind of invites everybody into the design process. And that's, I think, what we really love about it. So we're all in Figma. Let's see, what else do we use? We use Jira, which I actually have avoided using Jira up until last month, if you can believe that. But like the tools that we use to organize ourselves aren't anything out of the ordinary, I don't think. We use Slack, we use video chat. I already went over Figma. We have most of our code in GitHub. We have our design system that's running in a static site generator. And yeah, we just try to document things as much as possible, as far as just like making decisions. So that way, because there's no hallway chatter, you miss all that. If somebody isn't invited to the meeting, or maybe they're in a different time zone and they couldn't make the meeting, documenting the things that goes on in that, maybe recording the meetings, make sure that major decisions are made at appropriate times and with the appropriate amount of visibility.
Right. Shannon, what's your kind of tooling and documentation workflow look like?
Sure, it's a little bit of everything, and I'll sort of echo what Ted said, that especially since we're starting to work remotely, and a lot of people are working remotely because of COVID, that being careful just to document important meetings, whether it's just recording it or just having the information in other places, is really important. I don't know if anyone's had a run into this, where if you're like the only remote person and there's an in-person meeting and you're left out, but you can't, it's not your fault that you're remote or whatever the case is. So just making sure the information is there for everyone. Right now, I think we're sort of switching between a few different things. I think Workfront is our job tracking system. I've used several different ones throughout freelancing and other jobs. honestly, I think it's whatever works for your company or your team or your organization. There's a lot of good options out there, which is really, really cool. As far as feedback, it's a little bit manual back and forth with, maybe it's a message on Jabber or it's an email, but for the most part, I get the designs pretty much already done. It's usually a Photoshop file or a sketch file and put into our template, and it's pretty much good to go, which is pretty nice.
Courtney, you're up.
Yeah, so I will say that one of the disadvantages of moving to Microsoft was now I have to use their tech stack for a lot of stuff. So I gotta use Excel. I was like Google Docs all the way for like 10 years. And
are you a SharePoint master now?
Yeah, no, I am not. I SharePoint. I'm sorry, SharePoint team, if there's anybody here, but I can't do it. So I mean, I spend the majority of my day in Word docs and Figma docs, and we use GitHub. So all of our code is on GitHub, and then DevOps is what the product management team uses for just managing throughput on the projects and kind of tracking things. But personally, VS Code is my go-to code editor, and then I use Notion a lot. I love Notion right now. It's kind of replaced Notes for me as far as personal note taking. The tagging engine is awesome on it. And then Slack, there's several great communities out there with people that are way more knowledgeable than me in certain areas. And I try to join those communities and hit people up, ask questions. I don't know. My brain works better when I can kind of talk with somebody versus asking on Stack Overflow and waiting for a response. And then we use Teams for all communication. So chat and video.
Nice. Yitong, I think you're last one here.
Yep. I think Coinbase recently transitioned to working full remote. It's been like a learning period for us over the last couple of months. Some of the things that have survived well when we all uploaded ourselves is our design process has been fairly intact. Figma has been really helpful, just getting everybody real time into it and not really having to think about versions, being able to share links fairly quickly. It has realistically not materially impacted our process. Uploading the crits to the internet has been a little rocky in moderation, but once you get a hang of moderating those, it's fairly straightforward as well. What has initially become a problem for us is this desire to stay synced up on decisions. So Coinbase is a fairly fast-moving company. It moves a little faster than a company of 1,000 people has the right to, and as a result, everybody's trying to figure out what's going on at all times. And so a lot of that is sort of through casual conversation with your coworkers, and you don't get to do that anymore remote. So initially, I think what happened is everybody was just throwing calendar invites on everybody's calendar and trying to just catch up in real life. And I think what's really worked for us is just to aggressively move things into Slack channels. And maybe you can do something in a one-on-one DM with somebody, but if you can also do it in a channel, you just do it in the channel. And so aggressively defaulting to channel has been helpful for us. And really asking the question at most meetings, do we really need a meeting, or can we do this async? Just having the question has been really helpful for us. And we've come now to a place where we do far more async via documentation and just Slack than we used to. And the meeting load has reduced to a reasonable level. And I think that's kind of what worked for us. So aggressive channel usage, async decisions via documents, and Figma.
Nice. Yeah, it looks like everybody's kind of all on board with Figma, which I also love Figma, and it's something we're kind of using more and more at Litmus as well, for kind of all the aforementioned reasons. It's an amazing product. One of the things that I feel, especially people that are kind of new to remote work, they have to contend with is, which everyone here has kind of mentioned it too, you don't have those hallway conversations, you don't have those team lunches anymore. So there can be a lot of that just kind of general team morale and that team bonding tends to suffer a little bit as we all get used to this new remote world. how do all of you manage keeping team morale up and still kind of building those more human relationships with your teammates, even if you're not doing it in person? Anybody can jump in here.
We've been doing these fun little blind contour sketches. Like on Fridays, we'll have like
nice, yeah.
I actually stole this from Stack Overflow, but we do these little, like, you have a Bev Bash, and so people can bring whatever they want to drink, and it's just like a 30-minute call, and we challenge each other to do like blind contour drawings of coworkers. So we do these funny little like sketches. You have to close your eyes and pretend I'm visualizing Jason right now and drawing him, and they turn out hilarious. So it's just, fun little moment in time to kind of talk and see how unwind after the week.
Yeah, I remember we had a bunch of those fun meetings, and I've taken that from my old company as well, where like you have like your weekly stand up, and like they're usually like a stand up, like, oh, it's boring, everybody just goes around and talks. But what we try to do is leave like the last half of the meeting, and we rotate the responsibility where everybody can do like a team building activity, like the one Courtney just mentioned, like the census sketch, I think it's called, if you are a Cranium fan board game. We've done Mad Libs. What else did we do? Just last week I did one with my team where it was 2 truths and a lie, where everybody tries to guess like what the lie is, and it always leads to good discussion, good just laughing together. But yeah, there are just like so many ways that you can stretch video chat to make it almost feel like you're together. But as I'm sure a lot of us are thinking, like, it's also good to actually be together every once in a while too. So things like meetups are nice. Post-pandemic, hopefully, we'll see how that turns out. But yeah, I'm just trying to think what else. We also have just like random Slack channels for non-work things, like sports or rock climbing or whatever. And then I've noticed at Dialpad as well, folks around the company have just started to host like these optional like meetings, and it's all like non-work things. Like one fellow here does yoga. He hosts like a 30-minute yoga thing. Another person hosts story time for like little kids. So like 4 p.m, and I'm sitting with my 4-year-old in my lap, and we're doing reading a children's book over video chat. So just scheduling little things like that and to break up the day, so it's not just all work.
Yeah, like that one thing we did. We had our all hands a couple of weeks ago at Litmus, and obviously we weren't all in person, but we had like family talent shows and Mario Kart tournaments and just kind of fun stuff like that. So I fully support adding any of that in there. We also have an Animal Crossing Slack channel where we all post our turn-up prices for the day, so we can kind of get the most bang for our buck. Our ROI in Animal Crossing skyrockets. Yitong, do you have any kind of advice for keeping morale up and keeping everybody feeling like part of a team?
If you work all the time, you don't have to think about morale. No, I'm kidding. I don't. Stop it. No, we have actually not been particularly good at this. I think it's like, because I think we don't have a long history of working remote. The first order of business is to make sure nothing is on fire from like work perspective. And then we're kind of just like there, and we're kind of like, okay, well, we know how to work with each other now remotely. And now we're trying to figure out how to be like humans with each other remotely, which is still a process that we're learning. Like we do the occasional Jackbox, we do the 2 truths and a lie too, and we have all these social channels, but it's doesn't quite feel like we've solved it yet, honestly. And it's something that we're definitely working on. It just does not feel the same. Maybe that's like a different expectation that you have when you start being a in-office company, as opposed to like when you start with like a fully remote company, but it just doesn't feel the same yet. I'm a little bit worried in the long run for what that means for people, the class of people who came in full remote versus the people who had in-office culture and like the gulf between these people. So I don't know. I gave a very long non-answer.
Well, I feel like that's an important point, even not even just between people that might have been in the office beforehand and then like fully remote now, but there's, especially if you've been with a company that's kind of grown from like startup world to, you know, much larger company. Is there any way you all, like, any tactics for getting newer team members to feel like part of the team beyond just like, you know, having fun video calls and stuff like that? How do you make sure that, yeah, new team members and people that are part of this newer class joining your company feel like they're part of the company and feel like they can contribute and they're comfortable, you know, giving feedback and just participating in all those conversations that other teammates might be used to doing without even thinking about it?
We do the version of Two Truths. Sorry, I just have one super quick thing I thought was kind of funny. We do the version of Two Truths in the live with the team when somebody joins, except we don't tell people which one is the lie, and they have to kind of figure out in the one-on-ones subsequently. All right, that's it.
It's like playing detective or something.
Sounds terrible.
Yeah.
I was going to say that even though I joined my current company, my current role a little over a year ago, I am the last hire to my team. And one thing that I thought made the transition from being in office to working with a remote team was just a little thing, just like, hey, for our team meetings, which I think were weekly at the time, is if you can have your video camera on so we can at least see each other face to face. So my coworkers, I've never met them in real life yet. Probably it might be a while because of COVID, but I never felt like that they weren't there for me. Maybe that's more of a company culture expectation type thing, but you know, if something were to happen, I could message them. They have my phone number if something were to happen, and it's overall like I feel supported. I don't feel unsupported, even though they're, you know, states away.
Nice. Courtney or Ted, do either of you have any thoughts on this? Maybe especially both being from Stack Overflow and working together. Was there? I know you guys have gone through some growth and. You know, especially the last couple of years, how did you make it so that new team members felt like they were part of the team?
Yeah, I think just a lot of the normal things that you would do in an office setting, like say in a meeting, if it's like a big meeting and everyone's going around and critique or stand up or whatever, just inviting the new people to, you know, give them space to talk and contribute. You know, it's tough to do as a new person, but it's even tougher to do as a new person over video chat when, you know, you don't know the team that well, you don't know the nuances. Is this a good time to talk? I don't know if I'm interrupting you. There's a slight lag. So just giving them the space to speak up. Same thing with chat. Like if there's like a, you know, a chat culture. And then, yeah, giving them good first projects. That's something that we're going through right now, since myself and one or two folks at Dialpad are still relatively new. Just you know, finding appropriate projects for them to learn and, you know, make mistakes and learn from those mistakes and feel like, you know, I am in fact still doing a good job. I am the person and you hired me for a reason.
Nice. I like all that advice. I know we're getting close to time here. We have about 9 minutes left technically until we get shut off here. So I had a couple of questions, but did want to remind anybody if you had any questions specific to that you want to ask any of us here, just do that in that stage chat. How with, I mean, everything is kind of moving remote these days, and whether or not people want it to. Do you expect design to change significantly with that move to remote? It looks like we're all kind of using more collaborative tools like Figma, but how do you think this focus on remote work is going to change our tools and our process and just our team structures moving forward? So maybe, Courtney, I haven't heard from you in a minute. If you want to take a first stab at it.
I think this is kind of meta, but you're going to see like a lot of these companies that were kind of hesitant or resistant to it. They're going to have to like do a gut check and say, like, is this for us or not? And, you know, part of that is going to be you open yourself up to a lot more talent. So I don't know that like design in and of itself is not, the work of design probably won't change, but like the teams will change, and dealing with time zones, that's always a hurdle that all companies have to overcome. And how do you set expectations for managers to, monitor their employees and make sure that things are getting done on time? I mean, it kind of introduces this whole, like, I think that we've seen some companies go that way of like, they want to have like ultra surveillance on their employees. And with more companies going remote, it's going to actually create more choice for designers. So I honestly think it's just it's honestly a better world to move towards, in my opinion, to have. It opens you up to a diverse hiring pool. It opens up jobs to everybody. I mean, I don't want to take a job in San Francisco right now. I don't want to move there. So I just, anytime it's like, it's not a remote job, I'm not even going to look at it. So yeah, I think it's great for everybody. And I think that we're just going to see more maturity in the design field. You're going to see a lot more, like, less homogenous products probably, because you're going to get a more diverse worldview going into it. You're going to have somebody from Poland, you're going to have somebody from Japan working on projects versus just all San Francisco folks. And I'm not saying all products are like that. What I'm saying is it opens up the kind of the genie's lamp, right? Who knows how it will impact teams, but there's definitely gut check there for traditional teams.
Like that. Shannon, you were nodding a lot. Do you have a take on this?
Yeah, I don't remember which point, but yeah, I agree with like the diverse, like if you're open to remote, there is a greater pool of possible candidates. And it also means maybe a little bit more competition, but I think that's really interesting just to see what could come of that. Yeah, I don't think the work of design itself will change specifically, but maybe it'll open hiring practices just to see what that looks like in the future.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. I just want to build on something that Courtney said a minute ago. So like, all companies were forced to go remote really quickly. And, I think it's really interesting right now. We're seeing, I think what Courtney describes as an inflection point where you'll see these companies, some of them will just take their office culture and just try to jam it into remote. Right. So like everything's a meeting, everything has to be real time. You have to be at your seat between 9 and 5, like that sort of thing. But then, there will be other companies that say like, okay, well, just get your work done, or
right.
We're going to lean more into like the asynchronous side of remote work. And it'll be interesting to see like which way companies go. Because we're already starting to see, some companies that were traditionally office-based ones, like already, see the benefits and see the light, and say things like, well, even when this whole thing is over, if it's ever over, you don't have to come back to the office anymore.
Nice. I know we're really close on time. I did see, I like this question. What specialization within design do you see becoming most critical in the future? I have that, and then one more to kind of round out today's discussion. So maybe we'll start in our original order. Yitong, if you don't mind giving us your thoughts on specialization.
Oh man, I have a take on this. I think we're probably going to see the unbundling of the product design job, and I think we're going to see more, and I think design systems are getting generally a little cheaper to build for most companies. And I think with better tooling, better systems, and better component libraries, and just better primitives, the work of visual design and putting UIs together become less and less a part of many designers' jobs. It's just kind of like plug and play, and there's no really need for you to innovate on the UI side unless you're doing it on a systematic level. So I think we're going to see far more people specialize in design systems. I think the consequence of that is that probably a lot of what people do today as product design really just becomes advocating for user needs and sort of deciding what the product experience is that serve these user needs. And some of this will mean putting together a UI, but a lot of it kind of just will be what is the right thing to do for our users? And it will be a much more abstract and word-driven conversation as opposed to a screen-driven conversation, because the screen is going to build itself once you have the words. So I think a lot of product designers are probably going to lean a little bit closer to PMs. And I also think that given that more and more companies are going to have systems, these systems are probably all going to be built in somewhat similar ways. Like I don't expect there to be like marginal like business value in like UI differentiation. So I expect a lot of the design differentiation to move to brand. So like the stuff that you're seeing Cash App do, the stuff that you're seeing like a lot of these like companies that are known for brand. Sure, they do some of it in the UI, but a lot of it isn't in the UI. A lot of it is on their Twitter. A lot of it is on their like different media. And I think brand design is going to be like pretty wild in the future. And I'm excited for a world where like that is like a separate discipline entirely from product design.
Nice. Maybe we can do the Courtney, Shannon, Ted real quick. What kind of specialization are you thinking is going to take hold?
I think that we're seeing a lot more like mature, like artificial intelligence and machine learning being integrated into the products we're working on. And it's taking away, like Yitong said, we're not going to be focused so much on the screen. We're actually going to be focused on the results of an action the user performed in some form of interface. And that's not always going to be a screen. It's going to be talking. It's going to be me saying something. Maybe it's even in a different language and it's translated. So like, there's just so much complexity around like understanding psychology and how these systems work together. And like, there has to be somebody that owns that on these products. The more they get integrated into daily products, the more it's going to kind of spread out among general product designers spectrum, right? Right now we're seeing it kind of niche products, but it's going to grow.
Cool. Shannon?
Yeah, I think Yitong said it really well about advocating for the needs of the user, the user's needs. And I think that like 100%, 1000%, that's where the future needs to go. We all know accessibility is important, but a lot of times it is an afterthought. Same thing just for like, is the information easy or possible for people to digest? This is for me coming from working in like healthcare, financial, where there's like a lot of data and it's a lot very overwhelming. I would hope to see that as designers and developers, we can be better about distilling that information so that it's more accessible to everyone.
Cool. Ted, take us home.
Yeah, I'm just going to take what everybody else said and bundle it up and call it my own. I think I agree with what Yitong said about how, like, we don't need to reinvent the same wheels over and over again. So I think systematizing all that. At the same time, there's a lot of other things that need to be fixed in that system, though, and extended to. Like, we've all seen the terrible things that machine learning can do when just left to its own devices. So making sure that there's a human in that loop and making sure that things are inclusive, accessible, doing things with voice, doing things with, to make sure that the machine doesn't do what it's not supposed to do. And I also think that UX research is always going to have a home here because, I don't know, well, I guess computers could evolve so they could do their own UX research, but that would be a little creepy.
Awesome. Well, great advice. We're at time. So I'm going to pop off here and Lauren's going to pop back on and wrap everything up. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Yitong, Courtney, Shannon, Ted. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun learning from you guys. So hopefully we'll do this again sometime soon.